Creative Cloud Classic. Chewy's going to be like, what did you send me? That's pretty much what's going to happen, the video editor. So this is what most of us probably started with, Adobe Lightroom Classic, or what's designated as Adobe Lightroom Classic CC now. It's an amazing platform. It has a robust set of tools. If you are looking to do portrait photography in bulk, if you're looking to be a commercial photographer, if you're looking to do anything in regards to high volume, great platform to use. If you're a photographer that just posts things to Instagram and Facebook and stuff like that, consider Lightroom. Why? Because Lightroom is a really fast solution for you guys to be able to edit on the go and process those things. Lightroom Classic CC is a really robust platform that takes some time to learn, but it has a ton of tools built within it to do some really amazing things. So for example, what he had mentioned before is, what do you do with the filing structure? What do you do with the way that things are saved and synced in files that are here? These files, for example, the file that you see here, has nothing to do with my Creative Cloud. These files are just saved on this system. And just to be very clear, this system does not house most of my files. This is pretty much editing, and I offset all my editing onto a separate drive. Simply put, photos do not live on this computer. Photos live on a hard drive that I keep at home. For productivity purposes and for safety purposes, I don't keep anything on my laptop. Because if I lose this laptop or someone steals it, I no longer have access to those files anymore. So keep that into consideration depending on what you're trying to do. You can access catalogs from home and just literally double click on that catalog. So as an example, if I go to my file structure here, go to desktop, let's go to documents, then we're gonna go to, this is saved on tutorial, this is a catalog. And a catalog is a reference to the files that you're accessing on your computer. So let's say I have 100 photos that I've uploaded into Lightroom, or that I'm going to upload, or that I'm using in Lightroom. The catalog is what's referencing all those 100 photos. If you make any edits within Lightroom, because they're not permanent, it's referencing those edits as well. So as an example, I turned this photo to black and white. It is not permanently black and white. It's literally just a visual image of what that photo looks like in black and white. So there's not two photos, one color, one black and white. There's just a preview of what it would look like. All that information saved on your catalog. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So this being not the original file, as an example, I can manipulate this, I can edit it, I can quite literally go through here to my develop module, and I can change my exposure, I can change contrast, I can change anything that I want, and it has no permanent edits to my desktop, so to my photo. It makes it a lot easier. Now, there are a ton of tools, by the way, quick tip, right-click, solo mode, if this is the only thing that you want to go ahead and access, and you want to go ahead and minimize all these. Just quick tip for you guys to make your life a lot easier. I've gone through all of those where I'm like clicking all of them, figure out the one that you want, right-click, solo mode, and it'll go ahead and either expand or contract depending on what you're looking for. So again, I only want tone curve, right-click, solo mode, everything else is minimized. Okay? Editing these photos, as an example. If I'm shooting, how many photos do I have here? 331. If I'm shooting, let's say, an editorial, how do I get through 331 photos and not like go off the deep end? So this is the fastest way that I've learned how to do it. So I've culled through many different images. Let's say right now, file. Let's stick to this and then we'll move into what you're speaking about specifically, which is if I have to go through all these and they're all relatively similar, I start off with rating everything at a 3. Everything. Why? Because it gives me a baseline whether to go up or down. So let's make some selections here. I want all of these to effectively be 3. Right? We're gonna go through these and I'll sit there and look at all of these. So these are the photos that I'm choosing from. They're all relatively similar. And the hard part as a creative is making a distinction between each individual one. So I purposefully choose 2 images and say this one or this one. Which one do I like better? And I make a conscious decision, I have to stick with one. So from those 8, if I have to choose that, so 1 and 2, very, very similar files. If I want to make a distinction between the 2, as an example, and it's very dissimilar or very similar and I don't care, I'm gonna press 2. Why? Because as long as I have, so filter, rated, Let's move the one that I had it to. I'm going to keep everything at a 3-star. So that means anything that is not a 3-star gets bumped down. Anything that higher than a 3-star will stay. And I'll go through this with my art directors. I'll go through this with my photo editors. We'll go through and I'll say, 1 or 2, which one do you like better? Because we're talking about speed to market. They need these photos to create the ad quickly. These are things that they need fast. So I'm going to go ahead and say, you know what? I want to keep this left one as an example. So I'm going to take this, mark 2, that falls off my sheet. Now I have a total of 7 different images, not including this one here, right? And I'll go through and I'll do that with 3 photos at a time. I'm like, you know what? I hate this one. His eyes are squinting. Let's go this way. That's not so bad. I'm not really a fan of that one. Okay, let's go back through these, and I'll select through here until, you know what? I don't like this one so much. That's fine too. Okay, that's good. Let's start marking the ones that we have left to 4. Now we're going to go up to 4 and choose 4. Okay, I like that one. You know what? I really like that one. So let's take these 2 are very similar. I like his mouth open. Let's go to 3. And then this one here, you know, I'm not really a giant fan, so let's move this to 3. And I effectively get to a point where it's almost like the Hunger Games. I keep the final image for what I'm using, but I'm not deleting my choices. If I go back to 3 stars, all the files that I considered as almost as good are saved as 3. If I go back to 2 stars, the files that I thought were almost as good as a 3-star are still saved under 2. And I effectively do that because that way I can go back, and when a client says, hey, do you have something similar that is potentially better? I don't have to look through 300 images. I just go to my 4 stars and figure out in 4 stars whatever's similar there. If I don't have anything, I go back to 3 stars. So I'm not going through 300 and something different images. Does that make sense?
You're calling to send one image to your editor, right?
Depends on what the job is. So as an example, I've shot for brands where you need 35, 45 images. So if you're doing that, so as an example, file, let's create a new catalog. I'm going to say tutorial 2. Let's just create a new folder. So this is a real catalog that I shot for somebody, right? So I'm going to create this as tutorial 2. I'm going to import this and file, import photos and video. We're going to go to my documents, tutorial, working files, and let's go to 727. So this is a real shoot that I had to put together, right? These are images. There are a total of 869 photos. I have an hour to sit with my photo editor. We sat during effectively dinner that day and had to cull through 800 and something photos. How many of you have culled through images next to your client? It could take hours, meaning gone through every single image with your client. It could take hours. I don't like that photo. My eye looks weird. This looks weird. I tend not to do it, so I direct on set. The same way that I said 3-star, 2-star, 1-star, 5-star, 4-star, this is exactly what I do. Automatically, all these, let's say, overexposed photos don't get used. But as I go through this, notice that there's different shots for every specific scene that we were photographing in, right? As I'm scrolling through here, there's still 5 stars. Where did I get 5 stars from? On the day of the shoot, as I'm doing this, when the art director said, that one's amazing, I love that one, I rate on camera 5 stars. It imports into Lightroom as a 5-star photo. So right off the bat, if I needed to go to, let's say, choose an image, I can see what's already rated in that system. I'll go to 3 stars, there's already 5 stars in there. So I can look at images like, okay, let me look at this. What's going on with this photo? What do we like about it? What do we hate about it? What's going on there? As a matter of fact, the photo that I had showed you guys before, in Adobe Classic, that's what it looked like beforehand. So one of the things that they'll ask me is, hey, it's a gloomy day. The final file looks like. Take a next to show you guys the differences. I never pull up raw photos. This is always fun. This is what the final image looked like. They wanted something for fall. This is what it looked like out of camera. Okay? So you're talking to a photo editor. One of the hardest things to articulate is, that's not what it's going to look like when I'm done. Right? So how do you do that while you're on set? And part of that is this process. If you're tethering, so this day we were tethering, meaning we were taking the photos from our camera, using a cable to tether to a laptop to be able to see those changes. Well, I can go ahead and go to my develop module. I can go in here and see, by the way, just a quick tip. I'm going to give you a ton of tips. There's more than 5 by the end of today, if you've noticed. Click on write, Click on left here. What that is anything that is red is blown out, meaning it is complete white. There's no data. So if I were to go ahead and brighten this up, there would be more that there's no data. If I would darken it down, now there's data, but now I have no foreground. Okay, just considerations to have. If I got too dark, I would get blue, because that means there's no data there. Yep.
You mean it's pure white?
Wouldn't you start with a base of lights and darks, and like shift, and click on lights and then shift?
Yep, I can do that as well. That's totally fine. I can alt-click this, and that's fine. I prefer, generally speaking, with a client, quickly, just to see this. Why? Because I don't have to manually hold Option and click every single one of those files. As they're coming up, so as I'm tethering and as I take a shot, I can see right away that's exposed or that's not exposed. It makes it a little easier for me as I'm working. I try to be as hands-off with this as possible, and if I have an assistant,
If you're working with people.
yes. And even if I have an assistant, I want to make sure that they're getting the job done. What I care about is importing, less so on what's happening here, because it's a raw file. Is it exposed? Is it exposed correctly? Yes, got it. That's all I care about. And then I can fix anything or tweak anything that I need in post-production. But right away, we can tell if this is an assistant working on set, or if it's me working on set, and I don't have the mindset to sit there and shift-click because I'm working in volume. So Option, and I'm scrolling through. Right away, that's just a quick tip to be able to see that. So those of you that are interested, what I just did before, if I go to highlights and I hold Alt-Option and drag this, I can see, again, what's white, what's not. So it makes it a little easier if you're trying to do that manually. I tend to do this way as I'm syncing to be able to see things real time. When I'm working on set, I try to keep my job as easy as possible, right? So part of that process is looking at this as a whole and saying, what is the final output? When it comes to this, the file isn't going to look like exactly what it looks like when it first came out, right? So instead, what I'm doing is this. I'm choosing to create presets based on the edits that we're doing. So as an example, I'm going to warm this up, and I want it to be a little warmer. And I'm going to add some magenta just to brighten that up. And then I'm going to go to orange, his skin tone. So let's go to hue. What I want is just to bring down his skin tone slightly. But then I want to go ahead and add some luminance to it. And I can mess with this a little bit until I'm happy. Now, let's say this is every single shot. This is what I want every single photo to finally look like as I'm tethering, as I have that cable running to my camera. To do that, what I need to do is File, and you can head to Tether Capture, start Tether Capture. Let's say Studio Session. There's no camera detected, but I can head to Developed, same as previous. So as photos are uploading, as long as I look here, all photos, as long as I'm referencing the file that I just looked at, which is this one, all the files after that will import exactly with that preset. So as I'm taking shots, it's automatically updating as it's going. Same as last, same as last. And let's say there's a slight change in exposure. Say the sun starts going down or something. I can change that, again, go to same as last, and it'll upload the next file with that. If it's in post-production, it's as easy as holding shift, clicking on 3 files, pressing sync, making sure that all these adjustments are annotated, and pressing synchronize. Now all those files have the same edit. So if you look, all those files have the same color toning that I ended up using. You can add this as a preset as well. I'll show you guys that now. So let's say these files, this is something that I'm interested in doing. It's not the day of the shoot. I want to save this because we're going to shoot there next week. I don't want to lose this data. We can head over to Develop. By the way, shortcut, D for Develop and G for Library. Quick tip. So G Library, D Develop, and you can literally click through. Because I've used Lightroom for so long, I tend to not use shortcuts, even though that I know them. I'm just like, it's easier, I'll just do it faster, but it's really faster if you press D and G. Let's go to Develop. We're gonna go to Presets. And what I wanna do is I wanna go ahead and create my own preset. And a preset is a recipe. It's effectively saying, I want this recipe for later. I don't wanna lose this. It's a teaspoon of this, it's a cup of that. I never wanna lose this. So create preset. And I can say what I wanna sync to for that specific shot. So we're gonna say, let's call this tutorial 1, 2, 3. Okay, so that's going to get saved under User Presets, Tutorial 123. So I should be able to head over here and say Tutorial 123. So now the next time I shoot there, I have that preset already built in. I don't have to reference that catalog any longer. I don't have to reference those old files. I don't have to look for those old files. Those of you that are interested, people sell their presets online for $10, $15, and $20, right? So that's how long it took me to create something for 15 bucks if I needed to sell it, right? It's a very simple process for you guys to make some extra cash if you're really good at creating color tones and color grading. Color grading is its own thing. Right? It's its own process. It can take a long time. What I've tended to do in the past is I used to use my desktop or a laptop to be able to do that. And a lot of times tweaking with your finger or with a mouse is exhausting. So there are tools on the market now. So like Loop Deck, which is effectively, it's a media console. So I have everything built within this. If I wanted to change exposure slightly, I can change exposure slightly. If I wanted to change white balance, I can do that. So it makes my life a lot easier in the color grading process. So those of you that are interested in working on set, working quickly, I don't have to have an assistant say, use your mouse and quickly change that specific thing. I can just go over there and say, I kind of like that a little bit more. Or if I have an assistant, a makeup artist on set, my makeup artist she can be a little opinionated, right? So I can have her physically go here, and it's labeled contrast, clarity, shadows, and she knows that if she messes with shadows, it's going to make it darker or lighter. Because that way she's not asking me, can you click this way, can you click that way? This is an easy way for her to just twist and go. So you need the app installed. So this is the Loop Deck app. I click on this photo. I can go ahead and say, you know what? I want this a little brighter or a little darker, depending on what I'm photographing, right? So let's go through here. I can scroll through images for whatever I want to see. So all I'm doing is this, so you guys can see. So 1, 2, 3. I should be able to go through here and say, I want to add contrast or eliminate contrast. I should be able to go through here. And what I'm going to do is close out Lightroom, open it up, make sure that everything is working seamlessly. Okay. And let's open Lightroom again. As with any technology, by the way, you know how many times I've accidentally, wanting to go to Classic, clicked Lightroom, then had to close things? I'm sure you guys have done the same thing, but it gets quite annoying. Okay, let's go through this again. Okay, and I'm going to close out last thing. Let's close out Loop Deck and open it back up. And develop activated. That means that we are set to go. I should be able to crop and move things. So right now I'm on crop. I can press rotate. I can move things around depending on what I'm trying to do. I can set contrast, so more contrast, less contrast, and again, less contrast, more contrast, less contrast, less black point, more black point. And notice that it's light. It's light to the touch. I'm not spending a lot of time trying to figure out, like usually when you use a mouse or use your finger, it just moves way too much and there's that not fine, delicate balance. I can sit here and say, okay, I want some shadows. Okay, I'm happy with that. Let's go to reds. I want to go ahead and drag down my reds, my hue. Okay, on my hue, okay, I like that. Let's drag down some more of my hue. Let's click my hue. I want to reset. I can move down, I can move up. These are things I can do right from this tool. I don't have to use Lightroom that way. So it's a great tool for you to use to be able to speed up your workflow if you're sitting there at a desk trying to manipulate images. Or if you're like me and have a makeup artist that's a little opinionated, I'm like, go ahead, you do it. It makes it a little easier for her to actually do it. So I'm not joking anymore when I'm like, hey, by the way, what's your opinion? What do you think? Oh, I think it should be this. Got it, white balance. Okay, white balance is because this is like Instagram. This is simple. This makes it easier for them to be able to work with. It's literally your develop module on Loop Deck. So you can literally go through here. I have rotate as well as crop on here. I don't have to physically do that on the computer anymore. How many times have you grabbed rotate or crop and you made a mistake? I can do everything from here. If I wanted to be able to see that photo as an example, to make my selection, I just click. If I want to see before and after, all the shortcuts are built here. So again, before and after, Now I don't have to think about shortcuts. It's right on here. If I want to go ahead and export, I can go ahead and press File, Export. It'll start the whole export process. If I want to do full screen, I can do full screen now. I don't have to worry about shortcuts on that. If I want to see color versus black and white, I should be able to see color versus black and white. If I want to see hue, I can see hue. If I wanted to change, let's say the reds, I want to go ahead and change the saturation of the reds, I can press Sat. Notice on the right-hand side it says Sat. If I press Luminance, Luminance, Sat, and then I can edit those independently. Other things that, by the way, we didn't cover the color, but one of the things I'll do by the end of it is, as I'm going through this, I need some sort of workflow to make sure that we have a final select and where it stands. So for instance, red is my go-to to say, and this is me personally, this has nothing to do with Lightroom, this is to make my life easier. Red means I've chosen this, but it has not been edited. I've not retouched this in any way, I have not edited it in any way. I press 6, and 6 is going to designate that as red. Yellow means that it's gone on to have some basic editing. So those of you that asked me for the clone stamp tool within Photoshop. So let's say I look through here. By the way, this is a Canon 5DS, so there's a ton of data there. So that's why I was able to zoom in and see everything. So let's say I want to remove some of these blemishes, and I decide to remove it in Lightroom. Spot removal, select an area, and Sensei is going to go ahead and check where the closest area to that is. So again, spot removal, and I can also choose where I want to go ahead and pull that information from. So let's say I'm happy with that. That's my yellow. Yellow means I've done editing, some sort of editing in Lightroom, but it hasn't been edited in Photoshop. So then I can say, you know what? 7, because that's my yellow. And then when I right-click on this image, so if I press right-click, edit in Photoshop, and it gets retouched. Those of you that are not familiar with Lightroom and Photoshop and the way that they play together, any changes that I make to this file, so let's say I put, this is going to be funny when I look at this in post, but we're going to do this. When it decides to open. So I'm going to edit. We've chosen our files. I'm going to go ahead and say, drag over this and say retouched. And let's turn this to black, and let's increase our, so that says retouched. This is my retouch file. File, save, and now I'm going to close out Photoshop. Another thing to know, by the way, it's completely blue because of the fact that I have this placed. Remember the loss of data? So I'm going to go ahead and let's look at, as we go through this, zoom out. By the way, zoom is on here. Notice I went to here instead of here. Logically, it's just easier to be able to do. So I have 2 files now. I have the original and I have the retouched. Okay? This is the way that this works. The retouch file is now an original file. Because I saved it in Photoshop and because I made changes, it's no longer a virtual copy. It's now its own individual file. If I delete that file, it is gone. But I can make additional changes to it, and it's now a virtual copy. But for right now, for all intents and purposes, it is its own original file. Does that make sense? So it is saved onto your desktop as an original file. So if I wanted to go ahead and finish this off to my color coding, 8 means green, it's good. I can go ahead and upload that and send it to where it needs to go. So my tip there is having a color process for choosing your images. It doesn't have to be mine, but you can choose something where 6 to, let's say, well, from 6 to 9, you can choose colors to differentiate what you want to differentiate. But having some sort of color coding system that you're able to reference and use all the time. If you're working with other people, working with assistants, have to look back at those images, makes it a little easier to make distinctions. And just picking something and sticking to it. Because this image right here is from a year ago. I know that if I looked at that catalog and I had to open up the original catalog again, 6 meant that photo's not edited, green meant it meant to go. So I don't have to look at a distinction between the two. I already know green means it's already been retouched, it's done, I'm golden, I can move forward. And I can edit that photo, I can send that file off. I don't have to look through each file. Saves me time, saves me a lot of time when I have to go back to different catalogs or images. How often do I do that? Well, I'm shooting for brands that sometimes go back to those images for, let's say, their next year campaign, or for product shots, or for, to be able to put together a lookbook for the future. So it makes it a lot easier for me to be able to reference those files again. When you're printing, when you're editing, one of the most annoying things is being able to see every single thing that's going on there. Shortcut, L. Be able to just black out everything else, and it's called lights out mode. You're effectively just looking at that image. Makes it easier for me to be able to cull through this, right? Because now I'm not looking at all the colors and variants in the background, I'm only looking at that image. If I wanted to go ahead and zoom in, I can still zoom into separate parts. I don't have to just do lights out mode. And I can do that again using this technology. So let's press L again. Okay. Other things that I can do, if I wanted to press Shift F, I can make my real estate a lot larger. Shift F is going to allow me to go through this platform and be able to make everything nice and full screen. I have more real estate. So let's look at this again. This is how small my image is. I don't want to see all my tools. I want to see just Lightroom. Shift F. And I can still do the L, where I can still see the image here. Okay. I'm giving you the old school tips, and I gave you guys the new school like variants of that to begin with, but we can go through those. Let's say right now I wanted to go ahead and edit this file, and I notice some vignetting. One of the tools, and the less used tools that I find photographers don't use, is this one here, lens correction. Every lens has some sort of distortion to it. All those vignetting, all those black borders, anything, if it's concave or convex, if that image is warped in any way, the easiest way to remove that is to go to enable profile correction. Every lens, no matter what brand, what quality it is, has some sort of lens distortion. This allows you to compensate for that. So this will go ahead and the information will come from here. So this is directly from Adobe. This is a Tamron 85mm 1.8. So right away, it's a great lens, but it adds some vignetting around some of those edges. Regardless if they want to admit it or not, this is something that actually happens. And then the next thing is distortion. If it's convex or it's concave, I want to go ahead and see that. It can make my subjects look more bloated or more skinny than they really are in camera. So as an example, this is what it looks like when things are convex or concave. Do you guys see the bloat that's happening? So 1, 2. And you can kind of see it doing this, just subtly. So if your subject is the center of that mass and I bloat that section, they look like they have more visual weight to them. So another consideration to have is making sure, and so you guys know, this is like my quick tip, if you do it the opposite way, they get skinnier. So I can, again, he looks like he has more visual mass, and if I have a subject who's fairly uncomfortable about their weight, I don't have to use warp to begin with. I can use something like the distortion to my advantage. Okay. Chromatic aberration, for those of you that are using less expensive lenses, that's something else to consider as well. Another thing that I know that most people aren't using right now, which is, let's go here. And they've actually moved this up. It used to be all the way at the bottom, which is dehaze. So those of you that are photographing in, let's say, foggy situations, this is the tool that you need to remove some of that fog. So again, all that does, it looks at the data and starts removing some of the fog that you see. This has no fog, but the premise is dehaze is a great tool for you to use to remove any fog that you see. So as an example, let's see if I have anything here with a little bit of mist. This is a little misty, right? We're gonna take this, dehaze, and it's going to start to bring back some of the tones and textures in that background that weren't there before. And then if it's too saturated, I can do that manually. So I can go through here and say, okay, let's go ahead and just lower the overall saturation. Okay. Other things, the difference between vibrance and saturation. Lightroom tip. Vibrance incorporates your skin tone. Saturation does not. Meaning, if I turn this all the way down on saturation, everything is going to be black and white, okay? Whereas, if I go to vibrance and drag it all the way down, what do you guys notice? Skin tone, because it's compensating for your skin tones. Depending on what you're trying to bring up, it's always going to compensate for your skin tone. So knowing the difference between the two is infinitely important when you're editing anything. Color managing. So color management's infinitely important, and it's not a Lightroom tip, but this is a global photography tip. I have a very strict color management workflow. Like, here's what bothers me. Every single one of these monitors has a different color, including my laptop, right? I don't trust I don't trust just screens unless there's a calibration to it. So I make sure that every single monitor that I use is calibrated. This laptop is not calibrated. This is my capture, like on the go, need to run, go teach laptop. What I use is an ASIO CG2420 or ASIO CG318. Those are color reference monitors that are color accurate. Blue is blue, red is red, orange is orange. If that's not in your budget, a spider calibrator is going to go ahead and at least look at this and say, what's the most accurate color possible? The second thing is realizing what you're capturing is effectively Lightroom's own preset for that. What you want to use is a color checker. Using a color checker, so it looks like this. Where do we go? Here's the cool part about having internet. I can just show you guys prices and not feel bad. Color checker. This is the color checker passport. So we're going to click on, for video and passport, but so you can either do, basically this here. It's going to look at green, it's going to Roy G. Biv. It's effectively looking at Roy G. Biv. And this is for video. We're going to look for photos specifically. Let's just go with this. So let's say right now, it's going to look at Roy G. Biv, and it's going to say, I want red to be red, orange to be orange, yellow to be yellow, purple to be purple, and I want everything to be accurate. You take one of these in the same lighting conditions right in front of your subject. They hold it up, you take a shot. You calibrate that in Lightroom using their plugin, using this specific software's plugin, and it calibrates the exact color temperature that should be. So it's taking all of your perspective of what's right and wrong out of the equation. 1 is 1, 2 is 2, 3 is 3. So what you get is ultimately a color accurate photo. So if that person's skin tone is Jersey orange, it's going to be Jersey orange. And if that's what they're looking for, it's not my disposition on what my client should look like. That's who they are, right? So I leave that up to them. If they tell me I look a little orange, then I'm like, I got you covered, right? I can fix that. But using a color checker is the first way to get there. Just so we're on the same page, the idea here is that you want colors to be accurate. You want your reds to be red, you want your oranges to be orange, yellows, yellows, blues to blues. This calibrates your screen. This says this is what your screen should look like. This is the most accurate colors possible. This reads your computer and says, the display is trying to show orange, but it's really supposed to be showing red. And it counterbalances the two and fixes that. This does not mean that your photos are correct. This just means that your laptop is correct or your desktop is correct. That's all that does. If you were to just buy this, you're making sure that your photos are correct, but you may not be seeing that with your computer. So in a color management workflow, if you want red to be red, orange to be orange, yellow to be yellow, and you want to see to make sure that that's working, you need both. So you need a color checker and you need a colorimeter. Okay? Either one you choose is up to you. I would say find something in your budget. This is traditionally what I've used in the past. However, now I have a color reference monitor that does it for me. It has a built-in colorimeter, so the software matches the hardware and it's seamless that way. That's generally not budget friendly. I mean, you're talking about the CG2420 is probably about $2,500, but you also have to think that's a tool I use for work, and I've profited off of that 10, 12, 20-fold off of the projects that I've worked on. So it is a tool for me to be able to do my job. If you're doing this as a hobby, and this is something that you don't want to spend a ton of time and money in, colorimeter like this, color checker. Does that make sense? Yes?
I think I have the monkey.
Yeah.
What's the difference?
They're both the same thing. It's a calculator with a brand.
Oh, okay.
That's effectively it. I mean, as long as it's working, that's all that matters to me. That's the only thing that, as long as you're getting the accurate colors, that's all that matters. I'm very, very open with that. I am brand agnostic when it comes to things like that. So, yeah. Any questions about that aspect of things? I've taught whole classes on color management. It is very boring, but very useful. I really wanted to get back to, okay, so Lightroom as a whole. Each of them, Lightroom and Lightroom Classic, have their own benefits. If you're, again, a photographer that's just interested in mobile solutions, you want to work on the go, you want things faster, consider using Lightroom. If you're a photographer that really wants to take this seriously and have flexibility to edit in Photoshop quickly and do things this way, this is the way to go, Lightroom Classic CC. However, I would say that either way you decide to go, this is one of my last tips for you guys. There's a ton of YouTube content in the market. So much so, I mean, I have my own YouTube channel. If those of you that are interested, that are looking for information, you can Google my name and find the YouTube channel. However, this is even biting myself in my own foot. If you go to Lightroom, thank you. If you go to Lightroom, you go to Help, you go to Lightroom Classic CC Tutorial. Guess what you get? Tutorial content curated by Adobe. You get all the information for these platforms right from Adobe. They spent a ton of time and effort to create these for you guys. And you're getting something directly from the manufacturer, from the software developer. All of this is available for you to see. Organizing your photos in Adobe Lightroom Classic, importing photos into Lightroom Classic, and they're short, sweet, concise, and to the point. You don't need to spend an hour and a half, 2 hours in a class like this to learn new information. You can see that right from Lightroom. See, I gave you that afterwards. So, exactly. But that should make it a lot easier to learn the program. This is one of those things that people close out the second they start. They're like, I got it. I don't need it. And then, inevitably something happens, and you're like, I needed that. Where do I get it? Help, Lightroom tutorials. And I believe that if you go to Lightroom Classic as an example, Help, and apparently it doesn't have it built in. Oh wait, no, Lightroom CC tutorials, same thing. So they've created things for you guys to be able to learn how to use the platform. So those of you that felt like that was a little too much, no, your opinion doesn't matter. I'm just joking. Lightroom CC as a whole, there's a ton of tools on there for you to learn how to do things. Lightroom basics, how to do certain techniques. Adobe's done really great at putting together these tutorials for you guys, because ultimately, when you go to a platform like YouTube, sometimes you're listening to stuff for an hour, 2 hours before someone's giving you like a nugget of information. And you're like, okay, I just wasted how much time for that? This gives it short, sweet, and concise and to the point. At the end of the day, my goal is always to make my life easier. We have so many different things going on. Again, choosing which platform's right for you, which solution's right for you, choosing different workflows that work for you, being able to understand shortcuts, being able to understand a creative workflow that works for you, being able to work with other people, collaborate with other people. If you're part of the Adobe Creative Cloud platform now, there's a ton of solutions for you guys in this market to be able to do some amazing things. And I've seen really big enterprises, big companies that are producing content this way, and they can work fast between two people. So as an example, if I have to create YouTube content, right? My videographer has access to those master files, meaning my major files that I have. He has access to my logos. I'm not getting an email. Hey, do you have that logo? Do you have that font? Do you have that brand's logo? It's all set. Like, we can work seamlessly together. Thinking about Lightroom beyond Lightroom and thinking about where the technology is going is infinitely important for those of you that are interested in photography, because it's going to push you to the next envelope. It's going to push you to the next generation of where these platforms and programs are going. So I appreciate you guys being here. It's been 6 years since I taught my first class here, so it was pretty amazing to physically be here. And you guys have a happy Monday. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep. Thank you, guys.